All right, welcome everyone to our first gathering of this Starseed Wisdom Council. I have a special guest here with me today on this beautiful Aries new moon of 2023. We've just had the equinox yesterday, so we're in a really powerful portal, and I'd like to introduce Michael Feeley to you all. And Michael, tell us a little bit about your work and your background and what you're up to these days.
Well, thank you. In a very sort of brief overview, I was once in a past life, although it was this life, a UK police officer for 17 years in the UK's two biggest major cities. I was always on patrol, I was always on the front line, dealing with things as they happened. It gave me a very, very wide view and understanding and perception of humanity from both a good and bad side. It taught me how to investigate. It taught me how to find evidence. It taught me how to piece that evidence together. And it taught me how to build a picture based on the evidence that was presented, which is often different to what people are telling you. I was considered an expert eyewitness in any court in the UK. And therefore, because of that experience of just giving the salient facts, the way in which I speak, the way in which I present, the way in which I write is really just as it is. And that has moved me all through. Now, I signed up for a 30-year career and I ended up leaving after 17 years because there was so much going on in my life at that time that you could only describe as paranormal, supernatural, ufology, or whatever word you wish to attribute it. It was otherworldly stuff that was happening, and I was being bombarded on a daily and nightly basis. And as a result of that, it kind of turned my life full 360. And now I found myself on a completely different path. And what the former career taught me, as I say, taught me how to find evidence. And the path that I'm now on is still in the same line, but I now find coded evidence of the ancient past. And I now find evidence in the likes of pyramids and Stonehenges and different things that have been hidden purposely so that the average person will never understand the language that's been spoken, which is codes, which is cipher, which is enigma. And they have basically sought refuge in the language of the world, awaiting such a time that they are decoded so that they can live once more. And that is really what I do in terms of the experience of evidence gathering. And as a result of that, I've been able to put together a complete blueprint of the ancient world, which comes deeply into the modern day as well. Because what we see now comes from a far distant place. Although when you understand that time is really a fluid and not a static, you realise that everything is still happening now, just in a different parallel. And then, so my work now is to decode, decipher, to present a language, a higher language that is symbolic. And that is the language of the world that just people are just not seeing. So that's what I do now, based on evidence gathering, giving evidence, presenting evidence, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I love that. I as one of the many things I do as an astrologer is I talk a lot about the signs and symbols. I think a lot of like the archetype of Mercury, for me, really comes from Thoth to Huti. And I think a lot of like about the signs and symbols that are hidden in plain sight, right? Those with the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And these archetypes and these symbols are so important in these times that we're living in. And I'm curious, what are some of your favorite symbols that you find yourself really gravitating towards or working with in these current times?
I think really I get a lot involved in the runic alphabet. I get a lot involved in the meaning of words, the meaning of letters. I get involved a lot in the Hebrew language, which it's close to Egyptian in terms of, the secrets within. Mentioning Thoth and Mercury, you can take that back to the alphabet because the letter E, which is the second vowel, relates to Mercury, and so on and so on. Thoth really relates to thought. And so I do like the pentagram as well. I like the pentagram, I like the hexagram because it contains all the runes, all the runic symbols, all of these normal shapes. The trion Re, which is really the sixth platonic solid, which curves light. And when you curve light, you then get a different meaning to the photon and different things. So I guess in terms of favourites, I think that's quite general. I think in any symbolic shape, any geometric shape, which I know relates to vibration, which I know relates to certain levels of creation, which relates to every shape has a sound and every sound has a shape. So to these sacred buildings, which are sonic amplifiers, and you see all the geometry around you, that's because they are rebooting you, rewiring you, realigning you to a place of sanctity, or certainly that's what originally happened. So I guess the likes of the pentagram, which is not an evil, the Wiccan witch thing, it's quite profound, which leads on to many other different symbolic shapes. Do I have a favorite? Not necessarily. I just love them all.
Yeah. For me, the spiral has just been something that has been in my life for so long. And as a visual artist, it was always and always has been somewhere in every piece of work I've ever made, just really instinctually, and I just feel like the spiral is so beautiful to talk about time and how time is fluid, right? Like we're just constantly going through different rings of time, but regardless of where we are, we can see where we've come from and where we're going if we have that conscious awareness, whether it's in this incarnation or perhaps beyond this incarnation into other sort of multi-dimensional realms where we could be existing simultaneously.
Well, of course, the spiral, particularly the upward spiral, is where you turn, you twist, and you strive upward, because that is really taking you back to your original condition, which is the circle, which is the orb, which is the sphere of light. And that is your original essence. And we fall out of that sphere of light when we come into or downgrade ourselves into this, should we say, dimension of lessons, this lower world of lessons. But at some point, we will return back to that sphere of light, which is the creative motion. And that's why when we look at the stars, which is truly the original sacred science, the science really is observing and then gathering data from the observation. So the first thing that humankind ever observed was the stars, and was able eventually to read the celestial narrative, which means that they're able to predict the future. Because you know that at certain times of the year this is going to happen because a certain star is in a certain place, and so on and so on. So you became very much the prophets based on that cosmic knowledge. So we have all of these things that are there to teach us about not only the motion of the stars, but in working out and learning the motion of the stars, we also learn about the cycles of ourselves, because we are deeply connected to the cycles of the stars. So when you start to understand these sacred sciences and ourself and it, and how we're all deeply connected, and how we are able to see and understand ourselves, because we can look at the creator's cycles in the heavens. And we are in sync with those cycles, or at least we were until the Church of Rome misaligned calendars.
Yeah, with the Gregorian.
Exactly. We then started to have months that bore no relevance to their name.
Yeah.
So September is 7, but it's the 9th month. December is 10, but it's the 12th month, and so on and so on. So we were kind of deliberately misaligned with these star frequencies. When we start to regain this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, then nothing can be hidden from us anymore, equal to those who have hidden it from us. And that is really why I feel passionately about exposing this higher level language, which involves astrology and astronomy, which involves symbols, which involves the body, because the answer to the mystery is within the mystery itself.
Yes.
Ourself, the pentagram. And once we learn all this, as I say, we then become equal to those who have stolen the knowledge from us.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I resonate with all of that. When you were speaking about the sphere of the star, it makes me think of, this term star seed. And I think why people are waking up to that consciousness is a desire to elevate their consciousness to that higher source where they came from, and to like lift the veil that has been distorting the collective consciousness for quite some time, like with the birth of the Gregorian calendar. And so much of, I know you've traveled in Egypt like I have, and you can really, for me at least, I could feel where, particularly because of the Roman Empire, so many, you can feel the distortion frequencies that were intentionally set in Egypt.
Yes, and that really went across the world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wherever you have a significant place, that significant place is taken over by, the so-called significant people of our world. And when they understand that there's certain energies going through a certain place, they block and they cut them off, and they disconnect them from the network, because they are trying everything they possibly can to stop people from realizing who and what they are. And the moment that we begin to realize who we are, then they have no control over us. So they have a vested interest in not telling us. But we have to find out. We have to learn. We have to understand what we are, and not just slaves to an Aryan race that believes themselves to be the demigods between man and the creator, where they basically control everything. And we mustn't allow them to continue to control it anymore. Because now is our time to rise, and now is our time to say, this is what we are, this is what we're going to be. You've kept us in this human condition. Now we're going to strive for the human potential. That comes with understanding what that potential is, what we are, where we came from, where we're going back to. None of us are really from Earth. Genetically, we are programmed in the cosmos. Physically, we are an exploded star in the Orion Nebula. So we are all seeds of the stars. And when you look at the Egyptian word for star, it means gateway. So
it means netwit?
It means gateway.
Oh, gateway.
So, we wonder, soul wonders the stars, and it comes through certain gateways, which are one of the signs of the zodiac. And that has a prominent personality feature because we came through the gateway of that particular star. Yeah. And then we elevate or do what we need to do. And again, in the Egyptian myth and the Egyptian belief system, you go on a boat, or certainly the chosen souls go on the boat, Khufu's boat to the Great Pyramid, and they go across the cosmic sea to the duet, which is where Sirius and Orion is, to join the other souls, which are the stars, because they believe that twinkling stars are the souls of the initiates, of the pharaohs, of the kings who have gone before them. And that is the same when you look at the likes of Stonehenge, because in Egyptian, an arc means to circle or to encircle. So what you have in Stonehenge is a circle, which mimics Noah's Ark going through the celestial waters. And above Stonehenge, you can see the pictures of the whole of the zodiac. So when you start looking at the diurnal and nocturnal phases of the zodiac, you have the animals went in 2 by 2. So you have all of this zodiac sort of mirroring. You have the ancient priests who had to understand the movement and the motions of the stars. They had to understand what certain energies of the stars gave them in order to become a high priest. So you needed the likes of Stonehenge as a place of initiation in order to be there. When you look again, you look at the original condition, again, the circle, and you look at man depicted many, many thousands of years ago. It is a circle of the zodiac with man in a circle inside the zodiac. So then when you have the likes of the biblical Jacob, Jacob means heel catcher. Now, when you put man inside the zodiac wheel, his heel catches the zodiac wheel. So that is Jacob, the heel catcher. Now, that then has relevance to the heel stone of Stonehenge. So we have all of this biblical monolithic star sort of knowledge that has been expressed in different ways, but it means the same thing. Göbekli Tepe as well, you know, it has depictions of animals and scorpions and Taurus and the bull, and all of these things that are relevant to ancient man and the stars. Because in zodiacal man, each part of your body relates to a certain constellation of the zodiac. So we are really influenced by the stars. So when you understand them, you understand yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the emerald tablets, as above, so below, as below, so above, as within, so without.
Well,
Yeah.
emerald is the color of initiation. So the emerald tablets are really, again, all the sciences combined. You also have the Rosetta Stone as well, which I've decoded some of that in terms of telling us mathematically about those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear will come into this knowledge. But they've encrypted that mathematically, which I've managed to work out. But emerald, again, is you know, Osiris, the green man, emerald, it's all to do with initiation. When you look at initiation, it is the expanse of self, but it is really by invite that you come into the temples of the sacred knowledge. And that is how you keep it amongst those who you want to have that knowledge. And when you look at the likes of Moses, Moses is a title, which means a candidate of initiation. So again, we can bring the Bible. Now, the original Bible is written in stone. That's the Giza Plateau. And that was taken from the Giza Plateau, by the Kabbalah, by the Hebrews, and then it became corrupted, which then became later Christianity. So Christianity is Egyptian, really. And to be a Christian is not what you think.
Yeah.
To be a Christian is to be a Christed being, which means that you have awakened the Christ within you. Christ was never an individual person. Christ is every one of us. And that is the biggest secret that has ever been kept from humanity.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that so strong.
And it's time to change. It's time to re-look at the narrative that we've been given. It's time to re-evaluate the lies that we've been told. Because there is no savior coming on a white horse out of the clouds.
No one's coming for us.
No. So salvation.
We're already here. You know, we're the ones.
Yes.
We've been here all along.
As you see, salvation really comes from within. That's the only place it can come from. There are many of those who are activated now, who will be activated soon, who are helping and assisting with the task. But it is not an outside saviour, really, it is an internal saviour. We save ourselves by learning the game, by understanding the narrative. That's how we get salvation, whether through knowledge or by whatever means.
Yeah, I feel that so much through my study of astrology and understanding that as much as we expand in our own consciousness, there's a collective sort of bubble that affects greater humanity. And so that's why each one of us needs to really do our own internal work, because the more we do that, it opens that collective consciousness and that expands and widens in a particular frequency. And I think with this equinox, especially because we just had Saturn shift into Pisces in tropical astrology, and in a couple of days, Pluto's shifting into Aquarius until 2044, we're opening up a new, essentially 20-year cycle. And I've been tracking different cycles, and I think between now and 2032, there's a real particular gateway where a lot more people will be waking up, and the planets, Uranus and Neptune and Saturn and Pluto particularly, are really working with the collective. Like, it's like the volume is just going to be turned very very, very loud in a way it hasn't been. That, yeah. What do you sense about the next 20 years? Is there anything in particular that's come into your awareness or that you've kind of connected with?
My sense for the next 20 years is that within 20 to 26 years, we will be out of the dark ages of humanity. And that basically means the current ignorance, because that is how long it has left in terms of a cycle of things. So within that time, we will be out of the dark age, which means that there will be a light age.
Yeah.
So that's what I foresee, and I do, certainly on a personal level, and I'm sure that's replicated with multiple individuals like me. But from a personal level, I'm being contacted by more and more people who are asking questions, who are saying, what's going on? What's my purpose? You know, I know I have this mission to do, I know I have something to do, but what is it? And as I say, from a personal perspective, I'm getting contacted much more. So if that is replicated, all of these different individuals doing the same thing, and that's the only reason why it wouldn't be, then that shows you that there is a greater quest to know, you know, and the ancient world, which then has its foot in the modern world, because our generation from 2001, our time, was chosen to, should we say, re-emerge and re-establish ancient wisdom. And that is specifically, that year is specifically mentioned in the Great Pyramid. So
say more about that. Like, what about 2001? Because, you know, I can think of some things, but I just would love to hear your perspective on that.
Okay. Well, what you have is, in Egyptian star charts, you have 360-year cycles, and they designated the 17th.
I've got the calendar right here. I don't know if you can see her, but this is nuts.
Yeah,
it's hard with the glare.
Detail.
Yeah.
But you basically have 360-year cycles, and they designated the 17th 360-year cycle when ancient knowledge would re-emerge. Now that 17th 360-year cycle is 2001 AD, which is a specific date hidden in the Great Pyramid. So what they're saying is that this time capsule of knowledge was stored for a far off future from their time, and it would be re-emerged when they believed it had the best chance to be decoded, deciphered, and would help humanity. As I said at the beginning, when I say a far off future, their time is still parallel to ours.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily far off, it's just in a different timeline.
Yeah, and it's just like right there.
It is, it's right there. And I have evidence of that, because I've had, in our year 2017, I was visited by an Egyptian pharaoh. So
yeah, I remember, like, I heard you share that, and I think I told you when you and I first met that I was literally packing for my 7th trip to Egypt, and you were talking about 7 years after your trip to Egypt, you started having pharaohs walk through, and I'm like, this is so, like, so many sevens. You know, it was just like sevens were popping up throughout that whole time, and it was just so synchronistic that I'm like literally packing and listening to you speak of that at the same time.
Well, 7 is significant because it is the key to the 3rd dimension. You know, when you look at pyramid mathematics or Great Pyramid mathematics, they all relate to the number 7, or a division of the number 7. And for argument's sake, when you go south side to the top of the Great Pyramid, there, if you use the correct word at the correct time, which is a time containing 7 or a multiple of 7, there is a stone that slides open exactly 7 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So the number 7 is significant in our dimension, and that is why, you know, it was exactly 7 years after I came back from Egypt. I was given a cryptic message before I went about the Sphinx and having this knowledge added to my toolbox and having to understand it and realizing that it's actually for the past, the present, and the future, which all belong together in the same place. And you're thinking, well, this is 10 days before I go to Egypt, and somebody I don't know has sent me this cryptic message. And I expected more, but it was really, it was opening something internally in terms of a key, in terms of genetics, in terms of a wisdom that was to come 7 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And I, you know, in this particular period, you know, I'd have Egyptian scarab beetles manifesting out of the wall in my house. Mm-hmm. Again, as I say, I'd have an Egyptian pharaoh that just appeared alongside me, but it was a multi-dimensional view of the pharaoh. I could see him to my left, I could see him face on, and I could see looking out of his eyes all at the same time, mm-hmm. which is extremely difficult to explain, but it is a multi-dimensional angle of the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I said, there's lots of things, there's loads of downloads of information, there's all kinds of weird things going on exactly 7 years after my trip to Egypt, because again, it's that mystical, magical number 7.
And that for you was 2017, 7 years after.
Yeah, 2017, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which again has the number 7.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In
it. So yes, it's these magical numbers with certain magical vibrations and properties and meanings. So dates of birth, all of these things are a vibration. Mm-hmm. If you imagine in the beginning was the word, well, the word is sound waves.
Yeah.
So creation is sound, light is sound, dimensions are sound, timelines are sound. The pyramid shape is created from 4th dimensional spin that forms into the shape of a tetrahedron. So 3-dimensional solidity, or what looks like 3-dimensional solidity, is a result of 4th dimensional spin. Because as the energies come in the toroid and it drops through the middle of the toroid, it forms the pyramid. Mm-hmm. So the pyramid, again, is a representation of the 3rd dimensional world, which we should be able to escape by following the ancient clues. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Exposing the truth, bringing it to the light.
And taking hold of the baton from the past, you know, and saying, this is what they were saying. Now, if we implement what they were saying, then we too can replicate what they did.
It's fascinating that 2001 had such that sort of prophecy to it, considering that in 2001, so much changed in our world as far as global security goes, right? And then in 2020, it's kind of like we had part 2 of like an altercation around global security and health security. It's fascinating how those things align, isn't it?
You also had the film that was made a long time ago called Space Odyssey 2001.
Right.
By Arthur C. Clarke, where every time this black monolith appeared, then the race moved forward significantly. Mm-hmm. So what you have is a ruling elite of the planet who understand, because they also have access to ancient codes and ancient knowledge. They understand the significance of that year. They understand the significance of things that are coming. And they can't change them because it's divine blueprint. You know, mm-hmm. You can't change the movement of the stars, no matter how powerful you think you are.
Yeah.
It just happens. You know, the seasons happen, the cycles happen, things happen. But what you can try and do is infiltrate it or give it an explanation, which is the meaning that you want to mm-hmm. express. So if you are going to hijack a sacred year, then they chose a fantastic way to do it.
They sure did.
Yeah, but in doing so, they also forwarded people's awakening because what happened was a catalyst for them. And a lot of people realize that actually there's something a bit suspicious about what we're being told. Mm-hmm. So we'll look into it for ourselves. And as a result of that, a lot of people had the catalyst that they needed to forward them on a different journey. But they were always going to use a sacred, significant gear to try and hijack its meaning, because that's all you can do. You can't change, you can't do anything about it, but you can try and put your spin and your signature on what is happening. And that is the same with, the likes of the biblical end times, which is really describing the end of an age and the chaos that often comes with the end of an age.
Right.
When you talk about biblical judgment day, it's talking about the end of the procession of the equinox, the great year. And that's marked on the ceiling of the Capitol building. It's marked in the pyramid. It's marked in all of these different places. It's marked in the myth of Atlantis. It's during a 25,920 great year cycle, there will be 7 pole changes. Now, those are the 7 islands of Atlantis, which is really in the cosmic sea, not on Earth. And every time the pole shifts to another one, the previous one sinks in the cosmic ocean, the celestial waters. So at the end of the 7th, Atlantis has sunk. When you look at Noah's Ark, it wasn't something that happened on Earth. It's the Ark of Heaven that happens in the celestial waters. And what you have in these monuments and monoliths on Earth is a reconstruction of up there. Now, your Nile River is the Milky Way. Your universe is the cosmic cow, the awakening of the cow. You have the Atha cult. You have the Milky Way. You have galaxy, galactic. Gala means milk. So we have a reconstruction of what is going on in the stars mapped out on the Earth. So it has been misinterpreted and misunderstood in relation to the Great Deluge, the Great Floods, the Atlantis and Lemuria. Lemuria simply means a year. When you look at the Anunnaki story that ufologists are really, really into, they really get very, very upset when you tell them that they've been fooled. But in Sumeria, they wrote a giant circle as 3,600, which is the orbit years of this planet X, Nibiru, that we are told about. But all it is really is the cycles of the heavens. That's what Nibiru is. It's not a planet. It hasn't got the Anunnaki aliens who are waiting to come back to Earth. It is the cycle of heaven. When you start,
that resonates. I've always felt like that was a little like
it is. And what
weird.
we've done in the ancient past is we have personified the planets and we give a name.
Absolutely. Anana is Venus.
Exactly. So we've created gods and characters by personifying the planets. When we look at biblical Enoch, which means initiator, he went back to heaven, died and went back to heaven, age 365, which is clearly talking about a year.
A year, yeah.
So, we've been spun a yarn in terms of the meanings and the translations that people now hold dear. When I speak to a UFO community and tell them that the Anunnaki story is tosh, and I go to a church and tell them that Christ is not an individual, you get the same reaction.
Yeah.
They are really clinging on to
a
misunderstood, misinterpreted story. And that's all it is, a story.
Yeah. So many things are just stories humans love myth. Like we love story. It's part of the journey.
And that's why, the Christ story is called the greatest story ever told. Well, because it is. It's telling you that you're looking for this outside savior.
Yeah, hidden in plain sight.
It's you.
Literally, it's in the mirror.
You are Christ. And of course, when you look at magic rooms and different things, it talks about Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, talks about Christ. It explains how Christ is nailed to the cross, which is runic alphabet. And these were not characters. They were never characters. They never walked the earth in the way in which we are told. And even popes of the past, Pope Leo X has said it has served as well, this myth of Christ. What I'm saying is what Christ is far greater than an individual that walked Nazareth, which incidentally didn't exist at that time. So we need to look at ourselves as being our own saviors, as our own Christ. We are Mary Magdalene, we are Joseph, we are Noah, we are Cain and Abel, we are Samson and Delilah. It's all of these different things that we are, but what we are and our path to enlightenment has been described in several translations of stories. And when you understand that there are 7 layers, number 7 again, to these sacred mysteries, and the church teachings and the Anunnaki teachings and the mainstream Zoe-Awas teachings are the first level. And people dedicate their life to level 1 and don't even know about the other 6 levels, which gives them the truth.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, once they start to awaken, they go through a process when they realize how empowered they are. It's like there's almost that shirking back of like, ooh, like that means I have to take responsibility for so many things I've experienced. And I think that that's where some people sometimes get stuck, because they're like, oh, I'd rather just check out, like, give me, my alcohol back or whatever drug, ayahuasca, I'll just keep like going into other realms instead of being present to this one, which is just, it has plenty in it to take you to those kind of psychedelic places naturally, I find, which I imagine you're similar in that way.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You see, the pinnacle word that you used was responsibility. When you begin to understand these things, then you have to take some kind of action. And people would rather not take action, they'd rather not know. And even though they know, they kind of push it into the wings, that they don't want to know. Because when you tell them, it causes this, well, what am I going to do now? Then so that they try and shut it out. When I spent a little time in the New Age, which is really deeply flawed, it really is deeply flawed. And I was told, oh, we're going to the 5th dimension, and it was expressed to me as if I needed to pack a toothbrush, some clothes and towel, because I was going somewhere.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I've been around that as well.
when in reality, you can be anywhere, sitting where you are now, because dimensions, timelines are frequencies. And if you align yourself to a particular frequency of a particular dimension or a timeline, then you will be in that space. And if you maintain the frequency that got you in that space, you will stop in that space. So you don't have to pack a suitcase and go somewhere to get to the 5th dimension or the 17th dimension or the 18th or the 26th. You can be there from anywhere as long as you match and align yourself with its vibration.
Yeah.
It really, so I likened it really to this hotel of many rooms, almost like, my father's mansion has many rooms really, but I likened it to a hotel. And in one room you have ufologists, in the other room you have Anunnaki, in the other room you have religions, in the other room you have New Age, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And they've shut the door on each other.
Yeah.
So their individual room becomes their absolute reality.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Outside of that door, outside of those walls. And then you have the same in the other room and the other room and the other room. What I don't realize is that all of this knowledge and wisdom has a central core. And at that central core, it is all the same.
Yeah.
It is just manifest in different ways. So if all of these truth groups and ufologists and all of these New Ages and everybody else were to open the doors and speak, then they would realize that they're all speaking about the same thing in a different way. And that should unify them instead of separating them. Out of the 4,200 recorded religions on this world who all tell you that they are the truth and everything else is a false religion, at their core center, it is talking about the same thing, which is you. And when you realize that, again, they would be unified instead of being separated and killing each other over whose God is the most loving. Now, just think about that. Killing each other over whose God is the most loving. If you're
it's
so
insane.
Loving, would it want you to kill for it?
No.
Any deity, any being that seeks to be worshipped is a low entity.
Yeah, absolutely. Or that needs to be killed upon its worship.
Yes,
Like
it's
it's
like
just bizarre.
it is. My aunt is a Jehovah's Witness, and I avoid. I don't say these things unless I get asked.
Mhm.
A part of wisdom is knowing when and when not to say.
Absolutely. And
And
where?
between thought and speech, there is a divine nothingness, that sacred gap where you have the choice to return to silence or speak. And if you
Mhm.
speak, make sure that you honor and represent the divine with what you say.
Mhm.
But I said to why do you not celebrate birthdays? And she says, because Jehovah wants you to worship him. And if you celebrate birthdays, then you are honoring the person. I said, well, any God that demands to be worshipped is not want to be worshipped. Because if you are a true higher entity being,
Mhm.
you don't want to be worshipped. That's not what it's about. It's just simply not. So it's just ridiculous how people are just so programmed in mind that they cannot see beyond their closed room in a
Mhm.
hotel that has multiple rooms.
Yeah, the false programming. Yeah. What would you say to someone who's just at the beginning of their awakening? And I mean, because it's like it's so much to go through. Um, and like because in these times the distortions have just really revved up even more. I
Yeah,
mean, do you have any thoughts around that?
I do. When you look into symbols and codes and cipher, not only do they contain the truth, but they also contain lies. So if you imagine that you have this massive cloud, which is the population of the planet, and you know that a predominant number of those people in that cloud are always going to believe what you feed them. The mainstream news, CNN, all of these things. You know that these people are going to
Mm-hmm.
swallow what you're telling them. But you also realize that there's going to be X amount of people that are going to see through that illusion. Now, it can
Mm-hmm.
only be an illusion if you can't see through it. The moment you see through it, it is no longer an illusion. In the same way that you can't be deceived if you know you're being deceived.
Mm-hmm.
Now, legally, if someone comes up to you and gives you a dollar note, and it's a forged dollar note, a counterfeit,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to pass that off to you as real, but you realize that it is a fraudulent dollar, they cannot deceive you because you know that you're being deceived. The trickery of the mind, the deception, only occurs legally if you don't know that it's not real and you accept it. That's deception. If you
Mm-hmm.
know, well, I'm being deceived here, I know that's a false note, I'm going to take it anyway, it is no longer a deception, and that's the same way as an illusion. So you're going to have these people that come off this cloud, and they're going to know a little bit more than the cloud itself. So you counteract that, and you give them a little bit of information that the cloud doesn't have. So you now think that you are this truth movement, and you have the truth, and you can set up all these little pockets of social media groups and tell them that you found the truth, when in reality it is another version of the falsity that you've been given as truth.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're up against. And I was speaking to a lady either today or yesterday, when she was saying, she's just going round and round and round and round in circles with all of these truth groups. And I said to her, the true mystic belongs to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So don't go round and round in circles with what they're saying, because what they're saying is not the truth. It is a version of the false that is accepted as truth because it looks and appears and smells and tastes different to what the mass of the population are being fed. But it's not the truth. And they're given false symbols, they're given falsity, which they're run with as truth, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, honor yourself, belong to nothing, listen to what they have to say, but really It's your journey, it's your essence, it's what you think, it's what you find out that is true, and feel your way through.
Yeah.
So that is what I suggest to people. It is your journey, it is your path. Sometimes it can be a very, very lonely one, because as yet there isn't many on it. But that's why they lived in temples, that's why they lived on mountains in Tibet, that's why they lived in pyramids, because they were separated from the chaos that was going on outside. Chaos simply means to not understand in mystic terms. Order means to understand. So when you see the so-called Illuminati with their symbol, order out of chaos, it is understanding out of ignorance, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. How do you feel about this ramping up of technology and artificial intelligence, and like where it's taking people's consciousness and like kind of bringing them even more out of their bodies and more into this simulated reality, when it's, for me at least, I find the world of nature to be the most real and true thing we have, compared to the kind of civilizations most of us are living in these days. Even the geometry that most of our houses are built out of, they don't really work to support our health and our vitality. And if people are just spending more and more time in their device, it's like taking them even further from that.
It is the reality that we live in is largely apparently real. It's not necessarily real.
Mm-hmm.
If you imagine that we live in a 5 sense consciousness, we have the 5 normal senses that pick up universal waves. They pass the information to the brain, and the brain creates a familiar world, largely based on its own memory of what that familiar world is. So this is what it looked like last time, so this information must fit into this category. So I'll now create a familiar world based on the information that I'm given. But it's not the real world. When you have a system throughout humanity's existence, and it's been written about in many different ways, they always speak about a negative current or a negative energy. If you're Islamic, that will be the jinn. If you are Christian or Catholic, that will be the devils, demons. But they all speak about this negative current that has always infiltrated and kept man and woman down. That negative current is worldly and off-worldly, but it is a system of control. And everything that we do in this world is controlled by someone else. If you have a determination to control everything and to surveil everything and to create a world that you want to control people, and you don't want them to realize their sovereignty, their divinity, their individual or their group awareness. You want to take over them, and you want to plug them into computers because you can program computers, you can do what you like with computers. Now, even the people who are devising AI and thinking of plugging human brains into computers have actually said, and it's public record, it's not a conspiracy theory, which just simply means to breathe with God, which is what Jesus means. That is a conspiracy, but they even said that when we plug you into these computers, the human element will become inconsequential. Those are their words, not mine. That gives you some kind of idea as the plans that they have. Now, we can either say no, or we can just acquiesce. That's our choice. I don't want to live in a world where I'm attached to a computer.
Yeah, definitely not.
And I will do everything to resist that.
Yeah, and now they've constructed ways to grow babies, in computers. You don't even need a mother's womb, which, as someone like, I when I first started my own work, it was as a birth and postpartum doula. And I studied birth consciousness so deeply and really believe a lot of our programming as humans happens, when we're gestating in our mother's womb, because we hear her thoughts, we feel her feelings, like we learn about reality through her experience, and we take that program on, and then we get to choose as we become older, do we want to keep it or revise it? But like, to imagine that these so-called, I don't even know if we could call them humans, developing in computer-based wombs. I mean, that's crazy.
It's extremely dangerous, and anybody that thinks it's a good thing, I think, really needs to reevaluate their own rational thought.
Yeah.
We have now, certainly in universities in the UK, I don't know if it extends anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
now having computers doing students' homeworks for them,
What?
doing their coursework, doing their exam criteria. And what they're doing is they're pressing a button and it's printing off their coursework to such an extent that you can actually program mistakes so it looks like a human error.
Wow.
So it's all part of the dumbing down.
Yeah, it's like what we're gonna do nothing. We're just gonna sit and drool.
Exactly. But the thing is, if you just sit and drool, then you are in a docile state of non-conflict. You're just going to accept anything.
It's kind of like, did you ever watch Jem Henson's The Dark Crystal?
No.
It came out in the early 80s. Such a great film. Probably, I think, one of his best creations. And there's these little beings. There's the Skeksis and the Gelflings, and they're the main characters. It's basically, the forces of light and the dark. And but there's these little beings that the Skeksis have to, well, it's actually, the mystics are really the other duality spectrum of the Skeksis. And then the Gelflings are like the fairy elf earthling kind of creatures. But the Skeksis, in order to survive, they have to suck the life force out of these little beings. I can't remember their names. And they become, they're just like, they're essentially like just drooling and walking, and they literally take their life force to survive. It's a phenomenal movie. I highly recommend it, because it's all about like cycles of time and repairing this crystal. And it's very, very profound. I think he created it in 1984, which has, that was a profound year as well.
They're basically telling you, aren't they, really? I mean, when you start looking at...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the older films, they've been telling us what they've been wanting to do.
Of course.
And that's part of it, right? Like, it's like, if they tell you, they can do it.
That's basically a stipulation of the workings of black magic.
Mm-hmm.
That you have to say what you are going to do. But how they get around the grey area of that is they do tell you, but they do it in encrypted forms. Mm-hmm. Whether that's in movies, whether that's in music, whether that's in symbols or codes, they are telling you what they have planned. Mm-hmm. And it is for us to work out the message. Technically, they've fulfilled their bargain because they've told us. Mm-hmm. It's our fault if we don't get it. It's the same way, again, legally, if you sign a contract and you haven't read it, you're bound by it. And the fact that you haven't read it is your problem. You should have. And that really is the same in terms of they're telling you, and if you haven't read it, that's your problem. We're telling you. So a lot of these movies do reveal a lot of what is going on, or what is potentially going to happen if they get their way. And that really is a big if, because despite their efforts, despite all of the resources that they're putting into this 24/7 every day of the year, every year for thousands of years, there are people who are still swimming to the surface, and they're not being held down under the water. Mm-hmm. It must be quite demoralizing You know, if you get into the boxing ring with a boxer and you hit them as hard as you can, and you know that you couldn't put any more weight or power behind that, and they go, "Is that all you have?" You know you're in trouble, because you know very well that you can't hurt that person very much. So they're in kind of a dilemma as well, in the same way that despite all their efforts and continued efforts and the resources that they're putting into this, there are still people waking up from a sleeping state. And that must be quite demoralizing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll admit I don't feel sorry for them.
Never do I. Never do I. But again, if you look at it, there's multiple ways of looking at things. And you know, you can look at certain events of 2001. You can look at certain events over the last couple of years. I won't name them so you don't get banned. But you can look at certain catalytic events, and you can look at it from a lower level and saying, you know, they've all got it in for me. They're all going to get me. They're all trying this, that, and the other. And yes, at that level, that's what's happening. If you look at it at a higher level, you are seeing a catalyst for change, an opportunity for change. Otherwise, we just stagnate and nothing would ever change. So you have these, you know, these kicks in certain places to, like a pinball machine, to push you in a certain direction. And the catalytic events from a higher perspective is what they are. Also, when you start looking at the players of the game, they are serving a purpose. You know, spirit can't grow without the resistance of matter. Muscles can't develop without the resistance of the weights in the gym. You have to have resistance in order to grow. If man was never chased, he would never learn to run.
Yeah, absolutely.
So again, from a higher perspective, even the ones that we don't like who are doing this to us are playing a role.
Yeah, and in some ways can be the greatest allies because they're bringing the greatest, you know, intensity.
They are, even though they're lost in the role and they're playing it for real.
Yeah.
They're still playing the role. And the key to breaking the black magic, which no one would, I guess, agree with or do, and I find it difficult myself, the way to break a black magic spell is by loving the people who are throwing the black magic at you. That breaks the spell. And when we learn that you can't defeat them by becoming what they are, instead you need to take a higher level of consciousness and do things differently. Because if you become what they are, then their ranks become inflated and yours become deflated. There's more of them than there are of you, because you are basically jumping ship by becoming what they are. You have to take the higher level view and defeat them through awareness, defeat them through having the knowledge and the wisdom. And that's how we will defeat them and break down their black magic.
And having that heart of compassion.
As difficult and as gut-wrenching as it is.
It can be. Some days it's very gut-wrenching.
Of course it is. But again, if you want to break the spell, that's what you must do. If you want to, you know, pick up a sword or pick up a gun or pick up, you know, whatever, they've got plenty of them.
They do. They have great weapons.
They have great weapons. They've had many times to perfect them. They've had a long time to, you know, if someone can drag you down to their level, then that is a level that they operate in and they've perfected and they become professional.
Exactly.
So the one thing you don't want to do is be dragged down to their level. You want to try and bring them up to yours because they can't be there. And that way you will win. You know, the one place you don't want to meet a prize boxing champion is in the boxing ring.
Yeah, absolutely not.
That is their domain. That is their domain. You want to take them away from that. You know, you don't, let's say you don't beat them by becoming what they are.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite ways or tools to help raise that frequency? Like if you were to give, you know, a few ideas to someone who's like newer on the frequency journey.
What I say and what I always say and is we all have a deck of cards that we've been given.
Mm-hmm.
And to a large extent, we play the deck that we've been given. And sometimes it's 4 aces, sometimes it's terrible cards. Within your sphere of influence, within your life, within your reality, you must do everything you can that makes you happy. And you must do that for the higher percentage of your day, because then eventually it becomes the norm, it becomes you.
Mm-hmm.
Have a laugh, tell a joke, do things that make you happy. And that in itself will raise your vibration. If you are aligned and you feel, different rituals, different things, meditation, breath techniques, whatever, do it. If you don't.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to ask high frequency questions, there will be an aligning high frequency answer. And when that comes into your body, it is a high frequency that is coming into your body. When you put food and water into your body, making sure as much as you can, make it a high frequency food or a distilled high frequency water. Don't use microwave ovens if you can help it, because that literally just decimates and destroys water molecules,
Absolutely.
which over time become degenerative disease.
Mm-hmm.
So start to cook naturally, start to have as much organics. And I understand that there's things in the atmosphere that interfere, but as much as you can, start putting high vibrational stuff into your body. And these kind of things will turn your particular tide. If you imagine that at the moment, we do not eat food, we eat food-like, but they are of 0 vibration, or as close to 0 as you possibly can get. And you are putting that into your body, which is genetically modifying you to a 0 frequency. You're basically dead on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be aware, you have to be conscious, and you have to do as much as you can to help yourself create an environment that makes you as happy as you can possibly be within your life.
Yeah.
And that's really how it will start. And eventually it will take hold and it will start to roll.
Yeah, I totally resonate with all of that. And as someone who, I've gotten at times in my journey kind of rigid about certain spiritual practices to a point where they weren't making me happy anymore. And I realized, okay, this isn't the point of any of this. And I think that's important because I've made jokes in some of the teachings or circles I've offered, like you can even get addicted to green juice. There are people out there, like it can happen with anything. And it's like when you feel that nervous system gets so tight and rigid, then that frequency is no longer flowing, and it's just become another control mechanism in your life.
When you look at, again, the biblical thou shalt not kill, and you read that and you think it's murder, it's homicide, that's what it's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What it's talking about at the deepest level is thou shalt not kill your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kill your spirit? By addictions, whether that's drugs, alcohol, smoking, cigarettes, tobacco, addictive influences. You are killing your spirit.
Yeah, technology, if you just are scrolling aimlessly for hours, it
Yes,
is
you are.
another form.
You're basically living in concrete. You wear shoes when you go out to step into a metal automobile. You drive to where you're going. You get out of that. You go into another concrete building. You are completely disconnected
Mm-hmm.
from anything. And the way in which our life is constructed is purely to keep it in full. So you have no time to think outside of the reality that's given, that has been accepted by everybody as a true reality when it isn't.
Yeah.
So you owe it to yourself to step out of that and start doing things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always say to people, even if you just go outside every morning and put your bare feet and your bare hands on the earth and you take some deep breaths and connect into the core of the earth. And I mean, even people who live in cities can find a little patch of grass somewhere in most cities, that can, I mean, we just got to take baby steps sometimes.
That we have to do everything we can with a critical and rational thought, and that's something that is lacking even amongst intelligent people, is a critical and rational thought. And you have to take control of your own life. You have to take the reins of your own chariot, really, and steer it in the right direction for you. And that is often in the opposite direction to where everybody else is going.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to look what is best for you. Have a look at the journey that you want to be on. Have a look at the destination in which you wish to reach, and then find stepping stones to get to where you want to be. And if you want to walk a so-called spiritual path, all of these are man-made words that have a vibration, that have a letter sequence that also has a vibration. But if you want to be on the so-called spiritual path, if that can be defined, then you need to do something different to what the masses are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the direction that they're going is away from where they should be.
Yeah. I love that you said the chariot, because this is it from the tarot. This year aligns with the chariot. It's a 7-year, and that's the 7th card in the major arcana. And I think that this year, because Pluto's shifting into Aquarius, and there's just a lot of forward momentum available for people who want to take the reins of their chariot, whether it's metaphorically or there are places they want to travel to in the world to connect with sacred sites. I'm curious, how do you what do you sense about the world and the sacred sites and these sort of systems of control? Um, is there anything that you've kind of picked up around that, like in our current times?
When they become aware, and they are aware, because, as I say, it's been handed down generation after generation, this truth, this knowledge of the network, this knowledge of psychology, all of these things. When they become aware of certain significant gateways, currents, portals, whatever, they try to take control of them.
Mm-hmm.
In much talk for many, many years now by the UK government that they're going to build a highway underneath Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever been to Stonehenge will realise that in every direction for miles is just green fields.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are going to build a road, you don't need to put it underneath Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Unless you wish to disrupt sacred energies.
Mm-hmm.
That is the real reason that they wish to put a highway underneath Stonehenge, because you don't need to do that. But if you want
Absolutely.
to disrupt the system, if you want to disrupt the arterial routes of the body, you put something in there to stop the blood flow. And that is exactly what they're doing in relation to the sacred science, the ley lines, the dragon lines, whatever you wish to call them.
Yeah.
The arterial energy of Earth that is connected to cosmic frequencies. And that has a bearing on the human consciousness of the planet. So
Absolutely.
it's quite in your interest to be in control of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what they're doing in terms of shutting things down, hijacking things, because they want to disrupt and prevent the energies. When you go to a sacred cathedral or a sacred church or a sacred place, you will see certain, when for argument's sake, you have a royal visit to a particular cathedral in the UK, they will always mark that with a plaque on a certain wall, or a royal picture on a certain wall. What that is doing is blocking the energy of
Mm.
that building.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing. So wherever they put the plaque is where the energy lines run through, because they're now blocking it. It's
Mm.
like having a stream and putting a big boulder there
Yeah.
while disrupting the flow, and that's what
I
they're doing.
mean, much like what the Romans were doing back in the day.
Yeah.
When they were starting to take over so many sites.
Yeah, they're basically
Stonehenge.
they're causing, yeah, they're causing, they're putting dams
Mm-hmm.
to stop the flow.
Yeah.
But when all of these sites connect to each other, then you really will see a grid of fireworks in terms of the power of these things. But you have to shut them down. If you want to disrupt the electrical circuitry of your house or your apartment, then you pull the plug out the socket.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've just witnessed it in the years I've been going to Stonehenge, and it's become, they make it harder and harder energetically to access it. You can't touch the stones. If you have a private opening, you have multiple kind of like bouncer men with video cams watching your every single microscopic move. You can't even leave anything on the earth, like a natural little seed or anything. They inspect the earth. And when I go into sacred sites in Egypt, they come, if we rent the pyramid, they come into the king's chamber and take a flashlight and make sure we haven't left anything or rubbed any oil anywhere. And as of now, you can still obtain private openings at Stonehenge, but just in the years since 2018 that I've been bringing groups to Egypt, every year it gets harder and harder to have a private opening at the Sphinx or in the Great Pyramid, and they just increasingly raise the price more and more and more, to the point where it's like, for my pilgrimages, I'm like, I just don't know if we should even go, but then I'm like, but for many people, this is going to be their one time, and it's so important to activate and be in these sites. I mean, what I myself have experienced in the King's Chamber is like beyond the beyond. I haven't experienced that anywhere else on this planet. And there's a part of me that, as someone who loves to bring people to these sites with a very clear intention to work the meridians, to work the earth's ley lines in a sacred prayer to open people's consciousness, the average human, that their heart and their mind will open. It's slightly terrifying to think that maybe in this lifetime there might be a time where we can't access these spaces. Is that something that you feel could happen? And if so, like what do you recommend we do about it? Like, how do you kind of cope with that? Because for me, that's like, in my experience thus far, in my 42 years of living in this body, that's like my greatest sense of freedom, is to be able to go to these sites. Like, that's where I feel most alive.
You see, what you're describing is not conducive with the control system. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's complete. It's complete opposite to what they want. So, what they're going to do, like you said, they're going to make it as difficult as they possibly can. But when I've been to Stonehenge and I've been into the centre circle, you pay to go into the centre circle. There's people stopping you getting into the centre circle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and making you feel like you shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And then when you're there, they're trying to intimidate you by being there, staring at what you're doing and listening to everything you're doing, and it really does beg a belief that they're doing it and not even thinking about what they're doing, because they really do not have any knowledge at all about anything other than their gym membership. That's the only knowledge they have, and they are making it as difficult as they can, and they are making it as pricey as they can, and they are giving you more and more limited spaces and more limited time to be there. And then you are rushed, you are shepherded, because it disrupts you. You know, you
Mhm.
can't have your sacred space if you're having to think about, well, they're going to stop me in a minute and something's going to happen, or they're going to be, you can't hold that sacred space. And they are making it difficult because as the time becomes more a pinnacle time, and they understand that we are reaching a certain critical mass, then it's going to get more and more difficult. But what I would say is if you can't do it physically, then we must connect remotely
Mhm.
and join in kind of a remote network. Because yes, you know, everything you do, you have to have permission for, you have to be shepherded. You just can't do what you need to do because again, it's not conducive with a control system. If they
Mhm.
were to allow all these spiritual people and gurus and everybody else to go into the pyramid and expose what they really mean and do all of these things that are there to activate them, well, they don't want them activated.
No.
So why are they going to allow you with open arms to go in and do what they don't want you to do? You know, I once contacted the Cairo Museum.
Mhm.
I've been there, but when I was back home, I actually contacted them. And I did the same with the British Museum in London, the Egyptology department. And I said, at my own time and my own expense, can I come to your establishments and teach you the true Egypt? And I quote, no thanks, we're mainstream.
Wow.
I quote, because they don't want you to know.
Yeah.
It serves their purpose to have a lie as an official narrative.
Yeah.
Because the tourists are hooked in by the lie. And the moment you start rocking that little gravy boat for them, they start to get a bit panicked.
Mhm.
They don't want anybody to rock the boat. They are happy with Hebrew slaves built the pyramids.
Mhm.
That's what it is. That's what you will accept. You know, the Druids built Stonehenge, or it was Merlin, or it was giants. You know, all of these stories that they want people to believe, but it's not true. You know, and I'm an advocate of what is true.
So
But
I think the pyramids, and I know you and I spoke about this. I mean, they're at least 40,000 years old, the Great Pyramid. What was the date you had come up with, or the length of age?
it was at the time 73,440 years.
73,000. Yeah.
73,440. So, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot more than the 3,500 that the mainstream give that.
Yeah.
And again, that is based on Egyptian star codes, which later became the Hebrew calendar, the information of which was hidden in Dead Sea Scrolls in the Cumber Caves. So that is the age. They've been there a long, long time. Now, the only other person that I'm aware of that has ever come anywhere close to that date other than me is a person called Billy Myers, who is a Palladian channel.
Mhm.
And he was told by the Palladians that the pyramids, he said, ran about 74,000 years of age. So that's
Mhm.
close to what I came across. But out
Yeah.
of everybody that I've ever come across in my research, we are the only two. He was told, I worked it out. We were
Mhm.
very, very close to that date.
How did you work that out?
Again, by Egyptian star codes and looking at the tier levels of the Great Pyramid and working it out based on the mathematics of the levels, the slope angles, degrees of the pyramids, and star codes, which
Mhm.
gave me that specific date. So it is far older. You know, you're looking at rooms and upon rooms that you don't even know are rooms because they're sealed by stones.
Mhm.
But again, if you use the correct word, the correct time, and the correct frequency, they open.
Yeah.
And inside those rooms, there is much technology of this world, not of this world, carvings and writings not of this world on metals that are not of this world. So there's a lot to be discovered. Now, when the last initiations took place, certain parts of the pyramid were sealed. That is why you have these big stone rocks blocking the shafts. They were sealed. and all of this technology and knowledge was insulated, and those who were in possession of that knowledge dematerialized. So when you ask the question, where have all of these ancient civilizations just disappeared to? They dematerialized.
Mm-hmm.
And they are coming back
Mm-hmm.
in physical form now.
Do you think the Sphinx is about that age, about 73,000 years?
I think so, because again, the correlation of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at, the meanings of the Great Pyramid, what they were used for, what they did, when you look at what the Sphinx represents, which represents those who I believe built the pyramids, then it has to be around about the same age. Now, when you look at the Sidonian city on planet Mars, which has been geometrically mapped by a former NASA scientist called Richard C. Hoagland, who I did a 3-hour show with, and we went really, really deep into detail. But the Sidonian city is a place on Mars that has the face on Mars, that has the pyramids, has different things. It has the altar of witness, which is a mound that matches exactly Silbury Hill. When you get a map of Avebury,
Mm-hmm.
it is an exact match of the Sidonian city when you overlay it on Sidonian city. When you get the face of the Sphinx, the mathematics of the face of the Sphinx, it matches perfectly the face on Mars. When you look at the longitude and latitude coordinates of the face on Mars, it tells you how to find Stonehenge.
Mm-hmm.
Great Pyramid tells you how to find the 5-sided pyramid on Mars. So you have this longitude and latitude mathematical coordination satellite navigation system.
Yeah.
The face on Mars has been dated as being very, 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 very old. Yet it tells you, it matches the Sphinx. It tells you how to find Stonehenge. Now, the logical question is, if Stonehenge wasn't there, if the Sphinx wasn't there, then how can it tally up with the mathematics of Mars?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be in there, or it has to be in a fort to be there soon after.
Yeah. And why Mars? Have you leaned into that? Like, why Mars?
Mars, if you wish, again, it's not just Mars, it's Venus, it's Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
it's the moons of Mars. There's all different monoliths and obelisks and pyramids on various planets of the solar system, so it's not just Mars. But basically, Cairo, Al-Qahira, means the place or the camp of Mars. So it is my opinion that it is the monoliths and monuments on Mars that were reconstructed on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some kind of portal between the two. There's portals in all of these ancient sites. In August 1971, there were 5 men in the centre of Stonehenge with a tent or several tents and a campfire in the centre of Stonehenge. There was a farmer and a police officer approaching. Obviously, police have been called because of some kind of party or something going on. And both of them witnessed a flash of light, screaming, and the 5 men disappeared forever. Their fire was still alight and their tent was still in place, but the 5 men disappeared. Where did they go? There's portals to other planets from these monoliths and monuments on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they went. Now, when you look at in planisphere, which is basically the monuments and monoliths being in alignment with certain solar system planets, Stonehenge is aligned to Saturn, because Saturn is the god of stones.
Yeah.
So we have an alignment between Stonehenge and Saturn. When I went into the center of Stonehenge, when I did do a trip there, my co-host didn't know she was going to do this, but we were all standing in the center, or as close to the center as we could get. And she just went into a trance. She said she felt like she was dematerializing. She had to hold on to something physical to stop herself dematerializing. She began to use all of these harmonic tones in her voice, and she actually made the circle of Stonehenge vibrate and sing
Mm-hmm.
by the octaves of her voice. You know, we are lucky because if she'd have hit a certain key,
Yeah.
we may well have also
You all might have gone.
we all may have gone. You know, so luckily that didn't happen. But when you start talking about the masters of sound of the ancient past,
Mm-hmm.
they would have known how to do that.
Absolutely.
And they did.
Yeah.
And she was basically an amateur in a trance, and she
Yeah.
was able to do it almost to the point of dematerializing herself.
Yeah. And I think that's why we have to be so humble and cautious when we're working with sacred sites or certain technologies as well.
We should. I mean, I've personally witnessed portals.
Mm-hmm.
I've personally witnessed a portal in the sky opening up and having a UFO coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in dense, dark forestry, and I've seen portals opening up in the trees. And people said to me, "Did you go in?" And I said, "No." I said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I don't know that I'm coming back."
Yeah, you don't know what's on the other side
I
of the
don't know.
portal.
Right?
Who's there?
Exactly. I said, by all means, if you want to walk through, you carry on.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to. My life for now is it. And if I could walk through there, and who knows where I'm going to end up. So, no, I could have done, but no, I didn't. And no, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm all about being at the spaces and receiving the energy. And for me, it's like an opportunity to really offer a humble prayer for all of us on the planet, but not to like try to beam off into some unknown timeline randomly.
Exactly. But that's really sensible.
Yeah.
I've certainly been to parallel places and not known, but I've come back with evidence that I've been to parallel places. But you kind of drift in and out of these things unknowingly all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of the time you can drift into someone else's reality, and to them you are a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
But you just drifted into their reality temporarily and then come back. But that's a different thing to actually walking through a live open portal.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and I would not do that.
Mm-hmm.
That just makes no sense unless you have nothing to be here for.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter to you where you are.
Yeah. Could you speak a little more to the parallel realities, your the way you've drifted into them?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've seen clouds turn into numbers. I've seen pulsating grids coming off the moon
Mm-hmm.
towards Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen shimmers in, if you just imagine a curtain blowing in the wind, I've seen shimmers in that kind of surroundings as if there's a fluctuation in the matrix. There was one incident where I was sitting at the bottom of the stairs on my computer, on my laptop, probably looking at Facebook or doing a newsletter, nothing trivial, nothing complex.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that particular time, my computer skills were limited, very, very limited. And my wife would come down the stairs, and the way our house was at the time was, as she came down the stairs, she had to walk past me to get to the kitchen, which is what she did. And as she walked past my computer, she saw all this really, very complicated HTML code that I was working. She went into the kitchen and thought, "You don't know any of that." And then she came back, and I was just doing what I was normally doing, whatever it was, simple stuff. And she said what she just seen. She just bear with just a moment. She looked into the computer, and she actually found the program that I've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
That was on my computer, but I haven't been working on it in this reality because I wouldn't know how to.
Mm-hmm.
But in some parallel reality, I had knowledge of HTML complex computer code.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she saw me working on. But we were in, as far as we were aware, we were in this reality, but we obviously weren't. And we'd come back to it when my normal screen returned. And basically that evidence was stored on that particular computer. I don't work on complex computer codes, but somewhere I do.
Yeah, yeah. In another timeline, you're working on that.
Somewhere else I'm working on complex computer codes, but not in this timeline. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you heard the theory that like the moon is the satellite and we shouldn't, like, we should be afraid of the moon? And I mean, I had someone, right on my Facebook wall recently, like, you shouldn't talk about the moon, because I bring it up as an astrologer. She was like, it's evil and it's a satellite and it's controlling us. What are your thoughts on all of that? Because there's a lot of that going on in the new age world these days.
There is. I mean, first of all, the moon relates to biblical sin, because the moon god is named Sin. So when we are sinners, when we live in a world of sin, it's really talking about the sinister moon. But sinister originally meant lunar knowledge, which is the feminine path, the left-hand path.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a patriarchal world, you must overthrow and get rid of the feminine matriarchal system.
Mm-hmm.
So that is sin. You create sin as evil. The woman is evil.
Mm-hmm.
And you create a right-hand path cult, the sun cult, the Christ cult, to remove the feminine. So Christ, the sun, the right-hand path, came to eradicate us of sin, the feminine path.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole biblical sin relates to the moon and the feminine. And that's why we have a male-dominated church, male-dominated world,
Mm-hmm.
because we've deposed the feminine, the matriarch. When NASA put something or shot something or did something with the moon,
Mm-hmm.
they documented it as in ringing, as if it was hollow. And the only way that it could ring as it did was if it was a hollow planet. If you look at the Anunnaki story and the translation of the Sumerian scrolls, it states that the Anunnaki brought our moon with them and put it where it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe the Anunnaki story because it's full of holes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you were to believe science and you look at tidal rhythmites, which are basically moon scars upon the Earth, they have been dated at 22 billion years old. Sorry, my apologies, at least 2 billion years old.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at oxygen isotopes of Earth and the moon, they match, which means that the Earth and the moon were created around about the same time in the same region of space. Without the moon, the Earth would not be tilted 23.5 degrees. If the Earth wasn't tilted 23.5 degrees, there would be no higher forms of life on planet Earth. So you have the moon there to create the conditions on Earth for life.
Mm-hmm.
I accept that there are bases on the moon. I accept that there are races of beings inside the moon, as
Mm-hmm.
there are inside the Earth. And I think that the moon is being used as a base.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, I have personally seen pulsating grids coming from the bottom of the moon to the Earth. It's like a green grid shooting down. So it is being used for something.
Almost kind of like what's shown in the Matrix, the film.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was green, and it was almost like, when you get almost like a lattice green,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pulsating, funnel-shaped grid. And if you imagine a funnel, pulsating green with lines, that's what it looked like. So it's clearly being used for some transmission.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, can we speak about it? Yes, of course we can. Why not? Why does somebody want to give us fear and say you can't speak about this? It's like the New Age saying you must only concentrate on the light. You can't speak about the dark.
Yeah, totally.
But it's all of this. all of these words that are trying to stop us and prevent us and censor us from speaking about things. No, speak about what you want in a way in which you want. It is relevant, it is here.
Mm-hmm.
So speak about it. And then if somebody doesn't want to, then that's for them. No way should they impose on you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
use your delete button.
Yeah, I think about that so much. And as you're speaking about that left hand path and the feminine empowerment, and for so many women who have been working on reclaiming their feminine power, they'll think of like their menstrual cycle as being connected to the moon and moon blood. And I mean, as women and as humans, we have not come into a space collectively where we can honor blood, the feminine blood. It's like seen as this horrible, dirty thing in many of the religions too,
Yes.
all of the top consensual religions, like you're a menstruating woman can't touch anything when she's bleeding because, she's not holy. She's going to taint it. And it's crazy. And then you think about the number 13, which for me, I connect so deeply to women's blood as well. And so it's fascinating how there are even women trying to silence other feminines from that left-hand path, so to speak.
I mean, the number 13 is the secret number of Mother Earth, mm-hmm. which is actually Pandora, not Gaia. So again, that is a misunderstanding. When you said you're completely right in Judaism and different things, a menstruating woman or moon-strating woman mm-hmm. is dirty and should be avoided. And yet, behind closed doors, they are drinking menstrual blood, which is the wine of the chalice. Mm-hmm. So they don't consider it dirty. They consider it the elixir of life because of the stem cells and different properties. Again, it is lunar energy. But what they are doing is they realize that in order to achieve any godhead, any divine status, you have to be in a state of equilibrium, balance. And if you destroy, assassinate, teach as half of that being evil and should be avoided, you are creating that imbalance. And if, as long as you have an imbalance, you will never reach the knowledge that they have. Mm-hmm. So they're creating an artificial reality.
Yeah.
They're saying and teaching one thing, but then they're practicing another. They are drinking the same menstrual blood that they're telling everyone is dirty and should be avoided. Mm-hmm. So forget what the priests are saying, forget what other people who are naysayers and telling you certain things. The number 13 is connected because it is the secret number of Earth. It's not an evil number. It's been made into a superstition, but it is not an evil number. It is a secret, sacred number.
I've never heard that about Gaia actually being Pandora. Say more about that, because that's so fascinating. Because Pandora, it's like, don't open Pandora's box. Like all the evil things are just going to take hold.
No, Gaia is really Earth's ecliptic. Pandora is Earth. Pandora means the gift of all. Now, when you look at the white honeycomb of a beehive, represents the white robes of Pandora. And the honeybee is really a gift. And the honey is a gift. When you look at the hexagram of the beehive, the hexagram contains the runic alphabet. When you look at the likes of Roslin Chapel, it is set at the gestation temperature of a beehive. So you have all of these. The fleur-de-lis is basically a bee. You have all of these things that have mystical meaning. So Pandora is the secret name for Earth. Now, when you look at the Avatar movie, and you look at humans going to Pandora, they destroy Pandora for metal that they place value on. Pandora is Earth. The humans who are destroying Pandora are the humans who are destroying Earth for material gain.
For the
When you look
gold.
at the gold, when you look at the home tree, you are looking at Arthur's Seat in Scotland, which is the epicenter of ley line activity. Okay, so in Scotland, in ancient Scotland, there was a group of forest warriors called the Picts, Picts.
Yeah, I remember
Painted
learning about
themselves
them.
blue. They
Say that again. They were blue.
They painted themselves
Oh,
completely.
right. Yes, yes.
So you have blue warriors in the forests fighting over the home tree. Now that's Avatar, isn't it? Pandora. So Pandora is Earth, not Gaia. Gaia is Earth's ecliptic. So Pandora, meaning the gift of all, it comes into wide significance. But basically, you are talking about the Mother Earth, the womb, the cosmic womb, the gate into the world. When you start looking at ancient mounds which represent the womb, you go through that womb into the underworld, where you are navigating a labyrinth inside the female's belly, and you come out into a new day with the rising sun. And when you start wanting to look at complex labyrinths, look no further than Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Because you are working your way through the labyrinth, which represents inside the female, which you've entered through the womb, and you are navigating yourself out where you rise with the new day illumination. So you spent time in the darkness and death, and you are now reborn.
Yeah, which is so built into the Egyptian cosmology as well, that constant rebirth.
Yes.
And one of the things I love so much about the Egyptian cosmology is that I think, like, I'm someone that when I was in my early 20s, a huge part of my spiritual practice was around goddess, everything, goddess cosmology and all the things. And I was going through, a part of my awakening at that time was really wanting to overthrow the patriarchy and all the layers. And in my evolution over time and journey to Egypt, I've really been able to heal my relationship with the masculine on so many levels. And I think so much about like the Ka body, right? And like every human has a Ka that is of the opposite gender of their physical body. And it's like when we shut off one side, whether it's the feminine or the masculine, it's like we're really shutting off our limitless potential, our infinite wisdom.
Correct. But Ka is really Kala, which is secret knowledge. So
it's Ka is what did you say?
Kala.
Kala.
Kalaa, Kala, which is basically a form of Kabbalah. So Ka is really secret knowledge. Now, the secret knowledge of many of these ancient places is the unification of the opposites.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at the likes of Isis, what is Isis? Is it really a goddess? No. Isis is basically means yourself and your other self. And when you sometimes make the transition between yourself and your other self, there is a personal crisis, which contains the word Isis. So all of these things are sent to teachers, secret wisdoms, which is that marriage opposites. Because the marriage of opposites is what takes you to the place of sanctity, not an imbalance. So when you unify your masculine and your feminine, then you are getting somewhere.
Yeah.
When people say, my heart and my mind's at war, my dark and my light's at war, they shouldn't be. They should be unified. When you get to a place where they are unified, you are basically a godhead.
Yeah.
You are not the son of the sun. You are the son of man. You are the son of God, which again is also encrypted within the ancient runes.
Mm-hmm.
But these characters are there to teach us. They are examples of what we should be.
Mm-hmm.
They are not real characters, and in any one of them, say Tough, Teote, if you want to pronounce it, is fought. Teote is often seen with a baboon.
Mm-hmm.
What is the baboon? Well, if you open up the human brain, the olfactory tract looks like the baboon that is on the boat with Tough. So they're talking about the mind. When you talk about biblical, the Mount of Olives is at the bottom of the brainstem. And the Bible says the Mount of Olives will be split in two, east and west. Well, at the bottom of the brainstem, you have olives, the olivary system, which is split in two, one on the east, one on the west. They're talking about the processes of the mind. They're talking about the hyperconsciousness, the superconsciousness, the knowledge and the wisdom that is encrypted within these characters who are examples of that knowledge and that wisdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that those signs and symbols, they're amazing how they're everywhere.
They literally are. Symbolon, which means a tablet split into two. Well, there's Moses and his 10 Commandments, the two tablets, which is a symbol, symbolon. So they are literally everywhere. Automobiles, brand logos on clothing,
Mm-hmm.
business company logos, churches, cathedrals, monoliths, monuments. If I were to typify every single civilization, every single religion, every single piece of holy writing, I could actually amalgamate into one word: thyself.
Mm-hmm.
That is what every one of them is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get from condition to potential? Gargoyle's wings, the grotesqueness of the physical nature, or the spiritual wings. Every one of them is talking about the same thing in a different way, with a different name, with a different character, with a different story.
Mm-hmm.
They all talk about the elevation of you,
Mm-hmm.
and they may use a god name or a planet name that's personified as a god, or some kind of character to give an example.
Yeah, it's a metaphor. It's that mythological aspect.
It is what does a spiritual being look like? Christ. If Christ is the example of what it is to be a spiritual being, Christ is not a person. It is an example, but it is also an inner process.
Mm-hmm.
But it is an example of what that looks like. What does motherhood that contains within its belly spirit, the God, Mother Mary? That is an example of the motherhood that births the Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So we are given examples of what it looks like to be. It doesn't mean to say that they were real, and there's no evidence that they ever were.
Yeah, if you say that can get a lot of people upset. And not just Christians.
Yeah. You see, Christians do not know what it means to be Christian. Now that causes a bit of a problem, because a Christian is someone who has achieved and attained Christification.
Yeah, the consciousness.
And the ones who had achieved that wore a cross to commemorate their achievement. That's what it is to be a Christian, not to go to church on a Sunday and say one thing and then do something else for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
So let them get upset, and I don't mean that with any malice. It's a case of you don't know what you are yourself.
Yeah. But I think even a lot of New Age people who are part of, what they consider the Christ consciousness movement, a lot of people really grasp onto certain stories and narratives as if they had to be true and real. And I just feel like the more we detach and just see it all as like, they're just examples to enrich our creative capacity to allow us to see, like, holographically apply ourselves into those narratives that help us resonate and expand.
Well, all they do is just they just rename what has already been given as a story. Jesus Christ now becomes Sananda, and we now worship Sananda, who is Christ in the heavens. No, it's not. It's not. And that's not, as again, that's not with any malice. That's just saying it as it is. No, it is not. And you've just renamed the same thing, the same as Christ has been renamed from Osiris, from Horus. Mother Mary has been renamed from Isis. They're just the same things.
Yeah.
When you get to the Christ story, you have a look at how many other gurus and prophets and messiahs who have had the exact same story. Born 25th of December, were a mobile teacher. They had disciples. They were crucified. Now, by the time you get to Christ, it's happened probably about 30 times.
Yeah, totally.
So how can it be true? It's the same meaning. That's how it can be true.
Yeah.
They are basically saying the same thing in a different way, using a different name. That's the origin of truth. It is a metaphor. And if people were to realize that, they would get somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of grasping onto something that's just sand moving through time.
Yeah. Instead of regurgitating the same story and believing it, have a look at what the story means or meant. And then you can begin to realize what you are being told. And what you are being told is how to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And here we are at this equinox, time where we're in that like equal day, equal night. I mean, it's a powerful time of year to really reclaim more harmony and balance from within.
It is. It's the four creatures, the four beasts of Revelation, which is, relates to the cardinals, the equinoxes, the solstice.
Absolutely. And they show up in the temples in Egypt too.
They do.
Yeah.
Your fixed signs. And it's astronomy, it's astrology, which is the original sacred science.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've so enjoyed riffing with you and learning with you and expanding with you, Michael. Is there anything else you feel called to sort of close out our time with together on this Equinox portal?
Probably just in brief, really, which is everything that you've been told is not true. You have a duty really to find out what is true. You have a duty, if you want to move on and progress, to discovering the truth of the meaning of the metaphors, of the codes, of the symbols. And when you do that, your life changes. So question everything, reevaluate everything, and start anew.
Yeah, that's beautiful for this turning of the wheel of the year and all of the potential that we have as we just consider our current tropical astrology and where we are as humans right now, when we've come out of a time where a lot of people say, now people are penalized for what is true and what is not true according to whatever standard. So we're in a very wild time when it comes to sovereignty and humans being able to really anchor into their body to feel their own truth chord and what that means.
We live in an age where real truth is an enemy. But again, when you look into the meaning of the word truth by separating the letters of the word, really comes down to the breath of God. And the breath of God is the Holy Spirit. The word Jesus means divine breath, or circulation of divine breath. Jesus is the bridge between man and God, which is the breath. So truth is the breath of God, and creation, which is the sound of the breath, the voice of God, is the moment of truth. That is truth.
Yes. And we'll leave it at that. That breath of God, which lives within all of us.
Which also means conspiracy.
Wow. Thank you so much for your presence and your wisdom and all of the truth, symbology work you do on this planet, the revelation.
Thank you. I wouldn't have missed it for anything.
Awesome.